everyone, it's Lara. Thank you so much for watching. In today's video I will show you how to make two variations of a tissue box cover for your tissue boxes, which is kind of stating the obvious. Tissue box cover for a tissue box. Yeah, well, awesome. Anyway, so this is the first variation. As you can see, there is an oval-shaped opening which copies the opening that is on the top of the tissue box. And then I made a second version where the top part is a little bit more closed. So you can see a second possibility just in case you don't like the oval-shaped opening. I have already published a video in which I have shown you how to create the patterns for those two variations. If you missed that video, I will link it down below. And in this video, we will focus on the sewing part. So if you want to know how to make those tissue box covers, then please keep watching. Now, let's start with the easier variation. I have here two pieces of fabric pinned together, which represent the two pieces for the top part of my tissue box hoodie. I have hemmed the middle with a zigzag so that the fabric wouldn't fray, and then I pinned the pieces together. This line represents the middle of the top part. The next thing I have to consider while making this variation is that once I will sew the ends of the top part together, there needs to be opening big enough so that I would be still able to pull the tissues out. So I simply place the two pieces on the top of my box, and I will make sure that the last pins, which mark the end of the seam, are not too close to each other. And this looks fine, so I can put the tissue box away. What I will do now is that I will fold those two pieces in the middle, and I will make sure that those pins which mark the end of the seam are equally far from the shorter edge. So this looks right. So I will sew here those ends through with a straight stitch. Now the ends are sewn together, so I can open the middle piece, and I will fold the seams nicely to the side and pin it in place. And then I will sew here through with a regular straight stitch so that the seam allowance would stay in place. What I like doing here is always to put two pins just in the middle of the part, and then I like turning it over, and then I start pinning from the other side, because this is also the side on which I want to sew through. So this is how it looks like once everything is pinned in place. Now I will go back to my sewing machine and I will sew a little bit further from the inner edge through on both sides. Now the middle is finished. I have sewn through along the line in the middle on both sides. So this is how it looks like when I open it a little bit. You can see how far open it is. And I have also already pinned the long side pieces on it. I have sewn them in place and I have edged them with a zigzag. I'm going to zoom a little bit in so that you can see how it looks like. So you can see there is the seam and there is the zigzag. But don't worry, we are going to repeat the steps on the shorter sides now. So I'm just gonna fold those over, and then I will let's take one of the side parts, and I will pin it to the end of the middle piece, so like this. And since I couldn't see where the end is, I'm going to turn it over. So I'm just gonna switch and put the pins here in from the other side so that I will make sure where to stop and where to sew. And I'm gonna mark the line so that you can see it easier. So here ends the edge of the middle piece, and this is where the line is going to be. So I'm just gonna sew those pieces together like this. So this is how our hoodie looks so far. I have sewn the short pieces also on. I'm going to zoom a little bit in just to show you a few details. So here it is super important that the seam that comes from the long side ends exactly at the same spot as the seam that comes from the short side, because otherwise there would be a little opening and the fabric could fray. So it should look like a puzzle that you would make out of paper if you want to fold a box. That's maybe a thing that might help you in order to imagine how it's supposed to look if you are a beginner. So now what I need to do is to connect the pieces on the sides. So I'm just gonna fold the short sides together with the long sides, and then I will show you how the shape looks like from the side. That should be also kind of confirming what I just said about the corner. I'm gonna zoom in because then we can see it better. So this is where the seam ends, and this is exactly where our new seam needs to end again. So we're gonna go all the way down, and this line represents the seam that I will make now. I will go back to the sewing machine and sew each corner together with a straight stitch, and then I will also hem this part with a zigzag so that the fabric wouldn't fray. Now the sides have been sewn together and I have hemmed each side with the zigzag. I have also hemmed the bottom part with a zigzag because I wanted to skip the step since this is kind of self-explanatory. I'm going to turn the tissue box hoodie to the good side now. So as you can see, you can slowly see the shape of it. So, and the last step is going to be to hem the bottom, sorry, bad pronunciation. So I'm just going to fold the bottom part a little bit inwards. Basically, the amount of the fabric that I'm folding in is equal the seam allowance that I had marked on my pattern. And I'm going to do it around the entire tissue box, and then I will sew it in place with a straight stitch. Once I have all pins in, I want to make sure before I start sewing around that each edge of the box is equally long, because what we want to achieve is that the box is going to be nicely symmetrical. Another detail I wanted to point out is I always like being consistent with to which side I am folding the excess fabric. So I have decided that the side seams are going to be folded inwards on the short sides, so I made sure this is the case on both sides. It's not like it would really matter that much, but I kind of like keeping it consistent because I think it's just very pretty if you turn it over, and I like my pieces being also nice from the bad side. One final step before I actually start sewing around the bottom edge is to put the unfinished hoodie on my tissue box. I put it on, I slide the tissue through the middle opening, I make sure that everything is as I want it to be, and I also make sure that the sides are covering the tissue box to the bottom. And if that's the case, then I'm ready for my final step. Well, and once I have sewn around the bottom edge, my tissue box hoodie is done. Now let's move on to the second variation, where we will copy the oval-shaped opening. So this is the end of the seam allowance, so I will basically have to sew about, I would say, 1 centimeter away from this actual shape. I will not draw the entire shape again because I will use the edge of my sewing foot as a guide. So the edge of the sewing foot would copy this line that I have marked here. And yes, these are 2 layers of fabric that I will sew together first, and then I will show you the next steps. Now I have sewn around the oval shape that I have marked with the crayon, and now I have to cut this open. So I'm going to cut exactly around the white line here, which is far enough from the seam. So it's always best to leave like at least ½ centimeter seam allowance, ideally 1 centimeter, just in case the fabric could fray. We do not need here any zigzag because we will turn it over so that the bad side won't be visible. But what we need to do here is to cut several little triangles into this fabric so that when we turn those two sides to the good side, that this will make a nice shape. Anytime you are sewing anything that is round and you want to make an interfacing or whatever, when you turn it over, you always need to do this, like to cut in a few triangular shapes where the point of the triangle comes exactly towards the seam. So I'm gonna do this along the entire oval shape. Now I have enough triangles around the rounded parts. Those parts are almost straight, I don't need the triangles here. And now I will turn the pieces so that I will have a good side on each side. So I'm just gonna turn it kind of inwards towards the opening. And then I'm gonna align everything nicely. Very important is that here you will achieve a really nice line where the oval opening is. And I will start already pinning everything in place. So, and once I have pinned everything together, this is how it looks like. So you can see I have the oval shape in the middle. I'm going to sew around with a regular straight stitch. And what I also like doing whenever I'm working with 2 layers, it is not necessary, but I just like sewing the ends together so that no accidents could happen, so that none of the sides could be wrinkled. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna sew around with a zigzag. That way I will also prevent the fabric from fraying, and then it's gonna be easier to attach the sides to it. And the rest is basically the same as I have done for the first tissue box hoodie, so I will skip the steps and I will show you the final result. But before I show you the final product, I also wanted to show you the finished top piece. So here's the zigzag around the edges, and as you can see I have sewn around the opening. And there's also one thing I wanted to tell you: you do not have to use the same fabric for the bottom layer. You could use also simply lining or any other fabric that you have at home, maybe a rest of some fabric that you want to use up. So it doesn't have to be the exactly same fabric also on the bad side. So that was it for today. If you liked today's video, don't forget to give it a thumb up. You can also subscribe to my channel so that you won't miss any future projects. If you also hit the little bell next to the subscribe button, you will get notifications anytime I upload new videos. Thank you so much for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing you with my next video. Have a great day and see you next time. Bye!